I never imagined I would survive 3 days buried under snow. I never imagined I'd still be here to talk about it, or that the thing that kept me awake through those frozen hours wasn't hope, or adrenaline, or even fear of the cold itself, but the sounds that shouldn't have been there, the sounds that followed me every time I drifted too close to sleep. What I heard under that mountain is something I still can't explain, and maybe I never will. But I can tell you exactly what happened, moment by moment, breath by breath, from the instant the snow swallowed me to the second they pulled me out. I remember everything, and I wish I didn't. The avalanche hit so fast that I didn't even register it as an avalanche at first. 1 second I was standing on the ridge, tightening the straps of my pack, and the next the entire world groaned. Yes, groaned like the mountain itself exhaled in frustration. The ground trembled beneath my boots, and wind shot upward as if the air was being forced out of the valley. I had maybe half a second to react before the snow came down. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just froze, looking up at this wall of white collapsing toward me like the sky had suddenly turned into an ocean. The impact knocked everything out of me: air, thought, control. I flipped backward, my legs kicked up, and then I was tumbling. The sound was deafening but also strangely muffled, like being inside a roaring cloud. My pack slammed into my spine, snow filled my mouth, and cold stabbed through every layer of clothing. I tried to protect my face with my arms, but the force of the fall ripped them away. The snow churned me like a rag doll, dragging me downward with no chance to resist. I didn't know which direction was up. I didn't know if I would hit a tree, a rock, or a drop. I didn't know anything except that I couldn't breathe. When the snow finally stopped moving, it felt like slamming into cement. Everything compacted around me instantly. I tried to inhale, but my chest barely moved. My left arm was pinned across my stomach, my right arm awkwardly bent near my face. My legs were twisted but not broken. The cold attacked every inch of me, sinking deeper with each passing second. My first thought wasn't that I was trapped. It was that it was too quiet, completely silent. A silence so total that it pressed harder than the snow. I forced myself to breathe, tiny sips of air, just enough to keep from passing out. The darkness was absolute. No cracks, no hints of light, no sense of space. I might as well have been underground. My mind tried to make sense of what happened, to figure out the angle of the slope or how far I'd fallen, but panic overpowered reason. I tried wiggling my fingers. My right hand moved a little. My left didn't. I pushed my head forward, but the snow refused to give. I shouted once, just once, and the sound died instantly, absorbed by the ice like it never existed. I knew I had to stay calm. The more I panicked, the faster I would use up oxygen, and the snow wasn't just around me, it was sealing me in. I focused on slow breaths, counting each one, reassuring myself that rescuers would come. Avalanches don't happen silently. Someone must have heard it. Someone must know I was on the mountain. Someone must be heading toward me already. That thought kept me grounded at first, but the hope didn't last long, because after what felt like an hour, maybe more, maybe less, I heard something beneath me. It wasn't the sound of shifting ice. I know the difference. Snow settling makes small, crackling noises, soft snaps, gentle compressions. This sound was deliberate, slow, methodical. A faint scraping like someone dragging a stick or a tool across a hard surface. It came from directly below my spine, so faint I thought it might be my imagination. I held my breath to hear better. The scraping continued, steady and patient. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was water. Maybe it was a current pushing debris. Maybe a rock was grinding in the meltwater below the surface. But nothing about it sounded like water. It sounded like movement, intentional movement. I whispered out loud, "I'm imagining this." But hearing my own voice inside that frozen prison made everything worse. It made the space feel even smaller. I stayed awake as long as I could, listening to the scraping come and go beneath me. It never lasted long, maybe 10 seconds at a time, but it returned every time my eyelids grew heavy. Every time I drifted close to unconsciousness, something below me began to move again. At one point, I felt a faint vibration travel through the snow, as if whatever was beneath me pressed upward. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to acknowledge it. But I couldn't ignore it either. Hours melted together in darkness. My fingers prickled with pain, good pain, pain that meant blood was still flowing. My face was numb. My toes were numb. My breathing felt tighter every minute. But I knew I had to keep moving, even if only an inch at a time. I twisted my wrist, pushing at the snow around my right hand. The snow refused at first, but after persistent pressure, it softened slightly. I gained maybe a centimeter of space. That tiny victory felt enormous. My body position was awful. My right elbow bent painfully, but if I straightened it even a little, I could make a pocket of air near my nose. Every few minutes, I scraped at the snow with my gloves, pushing it away grain by grain. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the space grow slowly. Enough to breathe easier, enough to feel the cold more sharply. And the cold was unrelenting. It wasn't just cold, it was alive, creeping deeper into my bones with every breath. My jaw shook uncontrollably. I clenched my teeth to stop it, but the shivering spread through my entire body. I groaned from the pain in my muscles. Every twitch felt like someone stabbing needles into my limbs. At some point, the scraping sound returned, but this time it was closer, louder, slower. I pressed my head back against the snow, listening. It wasn't just scraping now, it was tapping. 3 taps, then silence, then 3 taps again, perfectly spaced. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought the snow would pulse with it. I didn't respond. I didn't even breathe. The tapping continued until something shifted beneath me, a long, dragging sound that faded slowly away. I told myself again that it was water. It had to be water, or ice expanding, or some auditory hallucination caused by fear. Anything else was too much to face. My throat felt dry, painfully dry. I tried licking the snow near my mouth, desperate for moisture. It soothed my throat for maybe 10 seconds before the cold made it worse. The darkness suffocated my thoughts. I kept picturing the surface above me, imagining the sky, the wind, the trees. Anything to remind myself that the world still existed beyond this frozen tomb. Eventually, exhaustion began to take over. My body wanted sleep more than air, more than warmth, more than escape. But the moment my mind drifted, the scraping came back. This time it was more frantic, faster, like something insisting that I stay awake. I forced my eyes open, even though it made no difference in the pitch-black space. I whispered, "Stop, please stop." But the sound didn't care. I don't know how long the first day lasted. It felt endless. My internal clock broke the moment I lost the sky. At some point, I stopped trying to track hours and focused only on breaths. One inhale, one exhale, repeat. Stay conscious, stay alive, don't sleep, don't listen. But I heard everything. My mind wandered in strange ways as hypothermia crept deeper. I remembered random childhood details. I imagined conversations I'd never had. I pictured warm places. Bonfires, hot springs, sunlight hitting my face. I invented flavors for snow just to distract myself, even though every bite chilled my teeth. I spoke to myself just to fill the silence. Sometimes I begged the mountain to let me out. Sometimes I cursed it. Sometimes I made promises to no one, promises I didn't even fully understand. But the scraping always returned, interrupting every moment of near sleep. Sometimes it sounded like metal against ice, sometimes like nails against stone. Once, I swear it sounded like breathing, shallow, raspy breathing directly beneath me. I froze in terror so complete that even my shivering stopped. I held my breath, waited, listened. The breathing faded. Then the tapping returned, again in sets of 3. I would have preferred the silence. When the second day began, at least what I think was the second day, I noticed something strange. The air felt heavier, warmer in some places, colder in others. Snow shifted around me as if settling deeper under its own weight. A tiny crack formed near my right shoulder, giving me just enough room to move my arm another millimeter. I pushed and scraped until the pocket grew. I widened the space near my face enough to take slightly deeper breaths. Hope returned in tiny bursts, each one followed by cold disappointment when the snow pressed tighter again. At one point I thought I heard voices, muffled, distant, like someone shouting far away. I screamed as loud as I could, but the snow swallowed the sound instantly. I hit the snow with my fist, screaming again, but I couldn't tell if anyone heard me. The voices faded, or maybe I imagined them. I didn't know anymore, everything felt unreal. But the tapping under me remained real, and it was getting louder. My body weakened. My limbs would barely respond. I couldn't feel my toes. I could barely move my fingers. My eyelids grew heavier every minute. I fought sleep desperately. I pinched my arm with numb fingers. I scraped my knuckles against the icy walls, anything to stay conscious. But at one point, I drifted, just for a moment. My mind floated somewhere warm and soft. My body relaxed, my breathing slowed. Then something below me scraped hard enough to vibrate my entire ribcage. My eyes shot open in the darkness. My breathing turned frantic. I didn't care what the sound was anymore. I only cared that it kept happening when I neared sleep. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It felt intentional. It felt aware. By what I guessed was the third day, I was barely functioning. My body trembled uncontrollably. My vision, though completely dark, seemed to swim. I kept hearing things, some real, some imagined. Whispers, footsteps, the wind, my own name, and always the tapping. Always 3 taps, always in the exact same rhythm. I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. But something in me refused to let go. Something told me that if I slept, I wouldn't wake up. And if I didn't wake up, I'd never know what the tapping meant. That thought alone kept me clinging to consciousness. Then I heard something new. Vibrations from the side, not tapping, not scraping, not breathing. Something heavy, something rhythmic, something moving toward me. And for the first time since the avalanche swallowed me, I felt something like hope. I whispered, barely audible, "Please be real." And then I heard the unmistakable sound of tools breaking snow. Rescue. But that was only the beginning of the strangest part. The moment I realized the sounds were real, and not just the tricks of a freezing mind, everything inside me shifted. I pushed every last bit of strength into listening. The digging wasn't coming from above like I expected. It was coming from the side. At first I panicked, wondering if the avalanche had trapped someone else near me and they were trying to escape. But then the rhythm became clearer, steadier, more deliberate. Tools. Real tools. Metal cutting through snow. Slow at first, then faster. The scraping beneath me reacted immediately. The second the rescuers got close enough for me to feel the vibrations through the snow, the tapping under my body started again. Not slow, patient taps like before. This time it was hurried, urgent. Almost like whatever had been beneath me didn't like what was happening. The tapping grew faster, louder until it turned into full scraping, dragging, clawing, pulling at something just inches below my spine. I stiffened, terrified to move, terrified to make a sound. But the rescuers kept digging, calling out to each other as they worked their way closer. Their voices were still too muffled to understand, but the tone was unmistakable. They were coming. I forced myself to scream, even though my throat burned. It came out weak, but I felt it vibrate the snow. I hit the side of my small air pocket repeatedly, ignoring the pain shooting through my arm. I screamed again. The digging stopped. A new voice called out, closer this time. I tried to scream back, but the scraping beneath me intensified, buzzing through the snow like it was responding to the noise. For a brief moment, I thought I felt the snow shift from below, as if something had pressed upward. Just a subtle push, but enough to make every hair on my neck stand up. Then the rescuers began digging toward me with renewed urgency. Snow cracked somewhere above my shoulder. Light, faint and blue, broke through a tiny slit. My lungs expanded instinctively at the slightly fresher air. Another chunk of snow broke loose, letting more light in. It wasn't much, but after nearly 3 days in complete darkness, It felt like staring into the sun. The tapping beneath me stopped instantly. I didn't understand it then. I still don't. But the silence that replaced it felt wrong, not peaceful, threatening. Like something had retreated only because something else had arrived. The rescuers reached my face first. I felt hands digging away snow carefully, brushing gently around my mouth and nose. When I saw the first face appear through the gap, a blur of goggles, frost, and determination, I exhaled a sob I didn't know I had inside me. The rescuer shouted something behind him, and suddenly the whole area around me came alive with activity. More hands, more tools, more light. But even as they widened the gap, my attention stayed fixed downward. Nothing moved. No tapping, no scraping, no vibration. Just a heavy, unnatural silence spreading beneath me. The rescuers didn't notice. They pulled snow away from my chest, freeing one arm, then the other. When they shifted the snow near my waist, I felt a sudden hollow space beneath me, as if the snow had settled downward into an empty cavity. One of the rescuers muttered something about how strange the compaction pattern was. Another commented on how lucky I was that the pocket had formed the way it did. I didn't say a word. I was afraid that if I spoke, whatever was beneath me would hear. When they finally pulled me upward, my body felt like it weighed nothing. Not because I wasn't heavy, but because every muscle had stopped resisting. They wrapped me in thermal blankets and placed me on a stretcher. As they lifted me, I glanced down at the hole where I'd been buried, and I swear, I saw a thin crack run deeper into the snow, further down than the rescuers had dug. A narrow black line like a void, a space where snow shouldn't have been able to settle. But before I could say anything, they carried me away. I tried to turn my head toward the rescuers, to ask them if they had heard anything strange before reaching me. But the words tangled in my throat. My voice refused to cooperate, and a part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. As we moved down the slope, a gust of wind swept across the valley, carrying a low, hollow sound. The rescuers didn't react, but I heard it. A faint noise rising from the snow we were leaving behind. A distant scrape, one single drawn-out drag. Then silence. My body shook violently as the cold and exhaustion crashed into me all at once. The paramedic walking beside the stretcher placed a hand on my shoulder, telling me to stay awake. I tried, but the warmth of the blankets and the steady motion lulled me into a daze. I don't remember the ride out of the valley. I don't remember being loaded into the truck. I don't remember arriving at the hospital, but I do remember waking up in the emergency room, surrounded by bright lights, heat lamps, and voices. Nurses placed warm packs on my hands and feet. Doctors whispered terms about hypothermia and dehydration. I kept drifting in and out, but every time I neared sleep, a memory jolted me awake. The tapping, the scraping, the breathing. The 3 perfectly spaced knocks beneath me in the darkness. One doctor asked me if I had heard anything unusual during the avalanche. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell the truth, to unload everything, to ask if anyone else had experienced something like that. But another part of me feared they'd chalk it up to hallucinations, that they'd blame the cold, the stress, the isolation. So I said the safest thing I could think of, just the snow settling. They nodded in understanding, but I didn't understand anything. During the night, I woke up suddenly with my heart pounding. The room was dark except for a faint hallway light leaking under the door. Machines beeped quietly. Warm blankets cocooned me. Everything should have felt safe. But I heard something. Not in the room. Not outside the door. Beneath the bed. A faint, precise tap. 3 taps. Then silence. I froze, unable to breathe. I knew it wasn't possible. I wasn't in the snow anymore. There was no ice below me, no hollow space, no cavern, no buried darkness. But the tapping came again. 3 taps. Always 3. I reached for the call button with shaking hands. But the moment my finger touched it, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, thick, unnatural in a way that reminded me too much of the snow. I didn't press the button. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I waited. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. But even as I drifted into sleep, I felt something deep inside me clench. The same instinct that kept me awake for 3 days buried under the mountain. Since being discharged, life has gone back to something close to normal. People ask if I have nightmares. They expect me to say yes, and I do. But the truth is worse. The tapping doesn't only come in dreams. Sometimes when I lie in bed at night, I swear I feel vibrations through the mattress, subtle but unmistakable. Sometimes when I sit quietly on the sofa, I hear a noise under the floorboards that sounds too rhythmic to be the house settling. When I'm alone, when the world is silent, when the air is still, that's when it happens. 3 taps. Always 3. I've tried ignoring it. I've tried pretending it's nothing. I've tried telling myself that whatever I heard under that mountain stayed there. But I don't believe that anymore. Because one night, not long ago, I woke up to a familiar sound. A sound I had prayed I would never hear again. A slow, deliberate scraping, dragging gently, directly beneath me. And even though I was lying safely in my warm home, far away from the snow, I whispered the same words I whispered on the mountain. Please stop. But just like before, it didn't stop. It waited, it listened. And then, with perfect clarity, the tapping began again. 3 taps, evenly spaced. I still don't know what kept me awake under the snow. I don't know what stayed beneath me for 3 days. I don't know why it hasn't left. I only know one thing for sure. I'm still listening. Thank you for watching my story until the end. I appreciate you staying with me through this experience more than you can imagine. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who enjoys survival stories. It truly helps the channel grow and reach more people who love content like this.